Welcome to Strangle School. I'm Josh Moody. I got my buddy Mike here. Today we're going to be talking about the scarf position and using it to transition into the back. All roads should lead to the back, guys. In the 2017 IBJJF World Championships, there were 22 submissions in the black belt division. 14 of those came from back position. Of all of the positions in jiu-jitsu, over 50% of the submissions at the highest level happen in back position. It's the most devastating place you can be. If you can get to the back, you should always get to the back. But I was doing this. You're on the back now. But I really like my side control. But you could be on the back now. All roads lead to the back. Scarf's only one road. I get the side control and Mike frames on my hip. I'm going to grab his elbow. I'm going to drive my head forward. I'm going to switch my base. And I'm going to block his shoulder with my knee. I'm going to switch my base again. I'm going to grab his armpit. I'm going to bring my head forward. I'm going to pick his shoulder up. I'm going to slide my knee underneath his shoulder blade to prevent him from getting his elbow inside. If I find that Mike's arm is kind of floating out in open space here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fingers, I'm going to stuff them into his armpit, and I'm going to plant my hand on the floor. I am going to start to walk my fingers in a circle. My elbow is going to connect to his elbow, and I'm going to walk my fingers in a circle around his head. Okay, I'm spider walking, guys. Remember, the thumb is the head of your spider. So my thumb leads the direction that I'm trying to go. This is going to make him very, very weak. Once I see a moment where his elbow crosses his center line, I need to get this wrist over here. So sometimes I'll reach up and I can just grab it with my right hand. Sometimes I'll come inside, I'll catch it with my left hand, and I'll hand it over to my right hand. Both options are good. I'm going to reach behind his head. I'm going to grab his wrist with my left hand, and I'm going to connect both his wrist and my wrist to his neck. It's very important that there is no space between his wrist and his neck. He'll push his elbow up over his head, and his head will pop right out of this position. So if his wrist is on his neck and my wrist isn't, he's going to bring his head towards my elbow, and that will create the space that he needs to get his arm around. So it's very important that I connect his wrist and my wrist to his neck very tight. I am going to use my hips to bump his hips. And at the same time, I'm going to pull start his head. So I pull his head in a circle, and I pull his hand underneath his ear. I pull his hand behind his ear, and I pull the top of his head towards my knee. Okay? I pull his hand under his ear, I pull the top of his head towards my knee, and I'm going to use my feet to push my hips into his hips, turning him onto his side. I'm going to switch my base so that my left knee is by his head, my right knee is by his butt. I'm going to bring my chin to his shoulder. I'm going to let go of his elbow here. I'm going to punch my left hand forward a little bit, and I'm going to reach my right hand under his top arm to grab my wrist. And this is the position I want to stay in. My chest is pushing into his back. Okay? My chin stays tight to his shoulder. So I got Mike in side control, Mike frames on my hip. I'm going to reach under, I'm going to grab his elbow, I'm going to push it into his body, I'm going to sit out underneath it and get my knee underneath his shoulder blade. My right elbow is right by his floating rib, and I'm driving my floating ribs into his floating ribs. I stuff my fingers in his armpit. Sometimes Mike's got me hugged too tight that it's hard to reach back into his elbow, but there's always a space inside of his armpit. I put my fingers to the ground and I try and connect my elbow to his elbow. I'm trying to bring his arm in a circle around his head, but sometimes they're wise and they start to move. I gotta make sure my elbow stays inside of his elbow, okay? And when I see the opportunity that his hand comes across his center line, I'm gonna reach up and snatch it. I reach behind his head, I grab his wrist, and for the gift wrap, I connect his wrist and my wrist to his neck. I bump my hips into his hips, I pull start his head, and I transition from scarf with a gift wrap to a seatbelt side control. I switch my base so my knee blocks his hip, my other knee's up by his head. I drop my underhook. I reach in between his arms, and I'm going to bring my left hand forward so I can grab it with my right hand. My chin goes to his shoulder, my breastbone is pushing in between his shoulder blades, and my elbows are tight to my ribs. Thanks for studying at Straddle School. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. This time and every time, thank you for being here.